And a good Tuesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Not many things to talk about weather-wise, but we'll go over everything that you need to know in terms of planning some outdoor activities, which if you don't have any plans for any outdoor activities over the course of the next week, I would definitely recommend making some because this is one of the most pleasant stretches of weather that we've seen in months in terms of not having many rain chances. The temperatures are feeling comfortable. But like I said, we'll go over everything that you need to know, what those temperatures will feel like as you walk out the door, what those temperatures will be like as you are heading home. And we'll also talk about some of the cloud coverage because that was a big talking point yesterday. It did feel very nice in the afternoon, but we had a good amount of clouds that were still in the picture. But first things first, let's talk about our rainfall for the month of September as a whole. We are officially 8 days into the month of September and going on 9 here this Tuesday. Well, the rain that we got over the course of this weekend, it did not record much at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. Now, this is just southern Bibb County because plenty of areas got their fair share of not only showers, but also some thunderstorms associated with the front that came through. We had 2 severe thunderstorm warnings that got issued. So some of those areas like Monroe County, Jones County, up into Hancock County, you guys definitely got your fair share of rain. So take this with a grain of salt. But this is where we stand here in Macon. We have recorded rain 2 days in the month of September so far, and they have both added up to 3/100ths of an inch. So yes, not much rain whatsoever. So we're still well below average. Obviously this says average August. This should say September, and the record for September all time back in 2004, just over 12.5 inches of rain. 2004 was a fairly active hurricane season, so Hurricanes Ivan and Hurricane Jean did dump their fair share of rainfall in the Central Georgia area back in 2004. And right now, we're off to a pretty slow start in the month of September. Not a bad thing because the month of August was our wettest month that we've had so far in 2025. 6 inches above what we normally see on average in the month of August in terms of rainfall. And this follows up a very wet May and a very wet June. Obviously, they don't look very wet when you see this box nearly double the size of those months. But July was also a pretty dry month. We just didn't get a lot of rain in the South Bibb County area. Plenty of areas got their fair share of rain in July. But overall, at least for Middle Georgia Regional Airport, we are still well above average, just over 6 inches above where we should be at this point in the calendar year. And once again, this is taken as of September 8th, so this was taken as of Monday. We're going to continue to see maybe if we can get this box back in the green category, but overall we could see this go down a couple inches below average and still be above average for the year as a whole. So we don't have too much rain in the forecast. Don't think we'll really see much change with this over the foreseeable future, but maybe if the tropics can start to wake up again and maybe if a storm is to get close to us into some outer bands of rain, that would probably be another stretch of some significant rainfall. But a bit of a spoiler alert, the tropics are very quiet, and we'll talk about what's been happening recently with that, and we'll talk about things like the peak of hurricane season, which in fact will be happening tomorrow. So it's another pleasant stretch of weather. Really, the past couple of weeks have been very, very pleasant. We're so used to holding on to that heat and that humidity a little bit longer than most areas of the country do down here in the southeast. So we've had a good stretch where we've had 80s as high temperatures, and yes, they've come as a result of cooler and drier air ushering in after a frontal boundary, and they've also come at the cost of overcast skies and plenty of rain that didn't allow for much of a warm up into the afternoon hours. Cool mornings, and when I say cool mornings, very, very fall-like. We could see some shockingly low numbers over the next couple of mornings, but each afternoon they will be full of some warm days. High temperatures below average, but still not quite down into the 70s. That would be a very fall-like afternoon. We're still looking at high temperatures to hover somewhere in the 80s all week long. Very slim rain chances, so cooler and drier air really playing a significant role on our forecast, and we're starting to see the big impacts of that cooler and drier air here as we transition into Tuesday afternoon. So a walk around the quad, nothing but blue sky. There is an abundance of sunshine no matter where you walk out the door, downtown Macon, downtown Dublin, or down in Houston County at the Georgia National Fairgrounds and in Warner Robins. Full of that vibrant blue sky, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful day, especially when you compare it up with numbers like this. We have some areas that still have not made the climb out of the 60s so far. Most areas probably popping up a 70, maybe a 71, but 73 at the warmest, which can be found in Toombs County down in Vidalia. So compared to the rest of the eastern United States, yes, our temperatures are nowhere near the highest value that we can spot on here. I think that title still goes to New Orleans, who has been very hot and humid as of recently. 81 degrees, the warmest number that I see all across the eastern United States, and 80 down in Orlando, so not too far shy of that. And there is a good amount of 70s still in the northern portion of Florida, which we haven't been seeing as of recently, but that's mainly due to some cloud cover and some rain in the forecast amongst the northern portion of the Panhandle state. Up to the north of us, there's plenty of 60s. You can continue to see these wind arrows funneling down from the north and the northeast. So we have a very wedge-like setup that is ensuing. It's ushering in that cooler and drier air up to the north. The Appalachian Mountains kind of act as a blocking mechanism and guide that cooler and drier air down into the state of Georgia and portions of South Carolina and getting into the North Georgia mountains, of course. Here's a look at your dew point temperatures. This is a very pleasant sight to see. A good mix of 50s and maybe 1 or 2 60s. But overall, any areas of that light green shade are very, very faint on this map. And we actually see predominantly no color on the dew point temperatures map. We even saw some dew point temperatures in the upper 40s this morning. That is the lowest number I've seen on this graphic over the last couple of months. So really starting to transition into hopefully that cooler time of year. But the wedge setup does not just extend for the state of Georgia. It in fact goes as far west over into portions of Alabama. So I was in Huntsville over this past weekend and I was walking out to 50s each and every morning, at least Sunday morning and yesterday for Monday morning. And it was a very pleasant feel. Cannot stress that enough. I liked it so much I decided to bring a little bit back home with me, and this cooler and drier air is going to continue to play a significant role in the forecast like we talked about, but also be very long standing. Here's a look at your feels like numbers, and yes, we might see a little bit of fluctuation. Feels like 75 in Sandersville as opposed to a temperature that's around 70, maybe 71. So some patchy areas will have slightly more humidity and moisture content than other areas. That's where your feels like number is going to be a little bit higher. But overall, I think a lot of these values over the next couple of days will be about the same as the actual temperatures are. But there has been something in terms of your current conditions that has been a factor all the way since the morning hours, and it will continue to be a factor into the afternoon, really over the next day or two. We are going to have some gusty winds, and they're continuing to funnel out of the north and the northeast like we were talking about with that wedge setup. But some occasional gusts right now, 17 miles per hour in Thomaston, 13 miles per hour up in Milledgeville. And those are the occasional gusts. Remember, the smaller number that you see in the white, that's going to be your sustained wind. So what the winds are consistently blowing at, and a pretty good, substantial, steady breeze that is continuing to be maybe up to 10, maybe even 13 miles per hour. Obviously not anywhere in the way of severe weather criteria winds, but it is a pretty breezy day, probably going to make for a bit of a bad hair day as we go into the afternoon time frame, and some of those winds could get even gustier. We'll talk about just how gusty and the timing of that very shortly. So hour by hour, we don't even make it to the 80-degree mark until 2 p.m. later this afternoon. And then as we go across that warmest portion of the afternoon, that 3, 4, and 5 o'clock window, somewhere around 81 or 82 degrees. I've actually elected for a high temperature a little bit higher than that. But we did hit 82 yesterday, and that was mainly due to a lot of the cloud cover that we had in the forecast, blocking a lot of the sunshine. But we were starting to feel the impacts of some of that cooler and drier air beginning to filter in. But now it is really widespread across central Georgia. 64 for a morning low temperature yesterday. We got down to 59 this morning in Macon, and I'll have to go look at the observation station to see if we had a brief period where the numbers got a little bit lower than that. But 59 was the lowest I spotted when we were talking about the forecast during the morning show. But 52 yesterday, that was the record low set back in 2017. Record high, 105 degrees set back in 1925. But something we have seen as of recently, a pretty pleasant change, I must say. The morning low temperature average did go down from about 69 degrees at this point last week all the way down to 67, but the average high is now below 90 degrees. 89 is your average high this time of year, meaning that the 90s are going to continue to be less and less frequent. Didn't record any rain yesterday, but 6.18. Remember, we were showing that calendar year departure of rain. That's how many inches we're above where we typically are on average at this point in a typical year. Sunrise at 7:14 in the morning and sunset now at 7:50. So those hours of daylight continuing to slim down, and obviously the days are going to be very short once we transition into the end of daylight saving time and transition into those first couple of days of winter. So for your Tuesday forecast, mainly dry and breezy, and below average high temperatures are going to really highlight the day once again. But the difference is today you'll see more sunshine paired up with those below average temperatures compared to yesterday. 83 is about 6 degrees below average this time of year, but it's a little bit warmer than yesterday, although that's going to be a pretty common theme day by day. We might see those high temperatures just steadily tick up about a degree or two each day. But I did mention the winds, northeasterly winds about 5 to 10, maybe even looking back in retrospect, a probably steady breeze of around 5 to 15 miles per hour. But the occasional gust could actually get up to 20, maybe even 25 miles per hour, indicating that this is a pretty prominent wedge setup when you do have some gusty winds like this. Sunrise at 7:15 this morning, so it already got 1 minute later than what we saw yesterday. So let's talk about those feels like numbers, the heat indices. They have been a bit of a talking point, especially towards the end of last week. We finally saw some temperatures rebound into the low 90s, and we had some patchy areas of some pretty muggy air that made those low 90s feel more like the mid and upper 90s, but it was very brief. Well, now that we have the drier air back in the forecast, we're going to be feeling pretty similar to what the actual temperatures are each hour of the afternoon, only topping out at 83 degrees at 4 p.m. That's exactly the number I have forecasted for your high temperature today. Here's the satellite and radar picture. All is quiet. There is one patch of cloud cover right up there in northern Monroe County. We won't see too many clouds today, and if we do see any clouds, they're mainly going to be of the variety of those higher level clouds that are a lot thinner in nature, and they don't necessarily do too good of a job of blocking any sunshine. And here's the state of Georgia as a whole. There's more clouds up in the northern portion of the state, especially once you get back up into portions of Tennessee and North Carolina. That actually may be attributed to some fog, the way it kind of just popped up out of nowhere. But it's quite a messy picture off the Atlantic coast, getting down into the state of Florida. And this is going to be associated with that stationary boundary that is just now to the south of us. We had the passage of the front on Saturday, and then it took a while to really make its way through, and it steadily just inched a little bit farther down to the south and the southeast. And we did have a low pressure center that was attached to that stationary boundary. That's what's leading to all the cloud cover and the rain chances on the Atlantic coast, but that's not going to really play a role in our forecast as we go throughout the next couple of days. So zooming through future view, we normally have a lot more talking points than we do, but it's very, very boring, a really uneventful forecast. Each morning starting out mostly clear or entirely clear, and each afternoon also wrapping up on a clear note. You can see these wind arrows, and they are a bit longer as we go into Wednesday afternoon, so we'll still hold on to the breeze until we really get into Thursday, and that's when I think the winds are going to finally start to calm out. But you'll start to notice a couple of light green dots going into the later portion of Thursday afternoon. I think this is probably going to be the only thing we really see on future view as we continue day by day, start to get the weekend in better view of these high resolution models, maybe just about a 10% chance of a sprinkle or a drizzle shower. We're not looking at anything in the way of substantial rain whatsoever, and nothing in the way of widespread rain. Anything that you see in the form of one of those light mist showers is going to be very scattered and very isolated in nature, and obviously going to impact maybe portions of one end of your county, and then you could be dealing with some completely clear or partly clear skies throughout each afternoon. So let's talk about the wind gusts. We go into the future a couple of hours. This is 1 p.m. in the afternoon. You'll see some occasional gusts that get up to about 20. I've seen as high as 22, maybe 23 miles per hour. But as we go into the second half of the afternoon, transition into the evening, we'll see that breeze subside just a little bit as we round out this evening. Just an occasional gust up to 15, maybe 16 miles per hour. And that's still the same story for tomorrow afternoon. Not quite as gusty as what we'll see over the next few hours for the late morning and early afternoon window. And then, like I said, as we transition into Thursday, we'll finally see those winds start to calm out. Occasional gusts that could get up to about 10, maybe 12 miles per hour, but that's not really a substantial breeze whatsoever. So for today, high temperature of 83 like we were talking about, mostly sunny skies. Basically the same story for your Wednesday, just a little bit of a cooler morning and maybe a tad bit of a warmer afternoon, although 84 and 83 and 85 degrees as we go all the way into Thursday are not feeling all too different whatsoever. But then as we transition into Wednesday and Thursday, I think Wednesday, tomorrow morning, will be the coolest numbers that we see. I was looking at our future view model run and did all the temperature plots, which you can actually see on our Weather Impact 24/7 stream. We have that model run with all specific locations, and you can see what the temperatures are at those certain pause points. I saw some mid 50s and I saw a couple of low 50s. So we very well could make a run at a record once again for Wednesday morning and getting into Thursday morning. I'm going to go back and do some digging after the stream, do a little more research and let you know what we really have the best chance of seeing, maybe some of those record lows at least matched like we did last week, or we could even set a new record as we go into maybe the low 50s. But that's, of course, if we hit that here in Macon, that's where all our record observations are taken all time. 58 on Thursday, so it's very similar to Wednesday morning, but still going to be maybe a degree or two warmer. And then 10% chance of rain, but still not even enough for me to really warrant putting any form of a rain cloud on that icon. I still think it's going to be mainly mostly sunny skies, but you could run across a very brief drizzle, and that's just going to be a bit of that free car wash weather that I always love to say, because it just kind of dampens your windshield. You can run the wipers for a little bit, get all those bugs off, and then you're probably out of that shower in a matter of a minute or two. So here's your afternoon high temperatures. There's not much going on like big weather scale feature wise. So we will see a steady warming trend, but still only maybe about a degree or two each and every day. 87 is the warmest day I have forecasted over the next 5 days, and that will be Friday afternoon. So maybe feeling a little bit warmer than yesterday did, than today did. I don't think we're really going to have much moisture in the forecast to make that 87 feel a lot warmer, but all of those numbers are below the average of 89 this time of year. And your average morning low now, 67 degrees. Every temperature I have for the next 5 days is at least 6 degrees below that threshold. So yes, we'll steadily see the numbers get a little bit warmer on Friday and Saturday, but warmer is kind of a relative term because temperatures still starting out at the 60-degree mark are going to be very pleasant. It's going to feel like fall during the morning hours, and then as we transition into the afternoon, it's still going to be on the warmer side, but not that oppressive summertime heat that can feel 5 to 8 or maybe even 10 degrees warmer than what the actual temperature is. Here's a look at the Muggy meter, and this looks pleasant. This has been my favorite graphic to show so far today because the dew point temperatures are not only in the 60s category, which obviously is going to be where you notice the humidity a little bit, but it's still at bearable levels, going down into the 50s. So that's already comfortable right here. Well, we could even flirt with the 40s by the time we roll into next week. Now we'll see some fluctuation with this day by day. I think you should probably expect a good mix of dew point temperatures in the 50s and the 60s over the next couple of days, but I don't think we get well up into the 60s, but we'll continue to keep a close eye on it. It really looks like maybe a slight rebound as we go into Friday, so that could induce some maybe scattered sprinkle chances, but as we go into the weekend, it looks like we see another steady drop from Friday all the way through Saturday, Sunday, and into the beginning of next week. So with this below average humidity, a really dry atmosphere, you probably guessed it, we're not going to have much in the way of rain even as we go into the weekend. There's plenty of rain off the East Coast. There's plenty of rain down in the state of Florida, but none of that really comes to fruition in our neck of the woods because there's less moisture in the atmosphere and we don't really have any big lifting mechanisms. So even if we did, it wouldn't have much to work with. You need something at the surface in the form of water and in order to lift that up and to form clouds and sprout some showers. And we see that a lot in the summertime months because the dew point temperatures are very humid. There is a lot of water in the atmosphere. So that's why you can just get kind of that convective pattern that we always talk about. So warm air rising, cool air sinking. When that warm air starts to warm up the surface, it's going to lead to rising motion. You have a lot of moisture at the surface that's continuing to lift, and that's why you get pop-up showers and thunderstorms more so in a very humid environment here in the summertime. Well, if we have the absence of moisture, we don't have anything really in the way of lift because our temperatures aren't warming up too much. You don't have the sufficient ingredients for that scattered rain in the forecast. Now let's go all the way into Monday and Tuesday, and you might see a couple of light green dots, maybe some blue that pops up. Overall, that's not enough for me to really buy more than a 10% chance of rain, but it does look like if you have any plans to travel down into the peninsula of Florida, maybe getting into Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, the rain chances will be better there. And if you have any deep sea fishing excursions planned off the Atlantic coast, then yeah, it will be a pretty messy forecast, but I seriously doubt that many of you probably have any of those plans, at least during the work week, to make any of that happen. And if you do, I would suggest going down in the Gulf, where it does look to be a little bit drier. So now let's check in with the tropics. And over last Friday, we had a tropical wave that had very high chances of developing. It had a 60% chance of developing over the next 2 days, and then a 90% chance of developing past that 2-day window. Well, it encountered a big swath of drier air, and it really inhibited the formation. So obviously you need some really humid air, and that's typically what's normally present over the Atlantic Ocean this time of year. You have warm sea surface temperatures, and obviously the water is a very humid body, so that leads to the tropical development of systems. Well, it encountered that drier air. It really disrupted the circulation that was trying to get going. So that didn't form into a named storm whatsoever. Even as it continued to move westward, I don't even know if I can find the remnants on the satellite imagery of what's even left of that potential tropical wave. And now we have no activity expected within the next 7 days. Now, yes, this is the next week ahead, obviously, and I did mention that the peak of hurricane season will be occurring tomorrow. And that's just kind of based on average when we typically see the most activity of tropical systems. I'll get to that in a little bit more, but also Ansley Parker has a great breakout that she will be working on to show you during the 5 o'clock newscast. So be sure that you're tuning into that, and she'll break down everything a little more in depth than I have. But there is a lot of Saharan dust that you can see off the west coast of Africa. However, there are continuing to be tropical waves that move off. Right here, this cluster of showers and thunderstorms just to the east of the Cape Verde Islands. That could try to get its act together, but there still is plenty of Saharan dust, which is also a big swath of drier air, and that inhibits the tropical formation process. And if this continues to move maybe into this portion of the Atlantic, maybe that cluster of drier air is really kind of broken apart that was present just northeast of South America right here. We'll see if something wants to get its act together, but there's nothing that you need to worry about tropics-wise over the course of the next week. So we were talking about it. We've had 6 named storms in hurricane season so far, at least here in the Atlantic Basin. The Pacific Basin has been a lot more active. I believe they're already on L or M for their named storms. Well, we are on the G name. Right now, we're still awaiting tropical storm or tropical depression Gabrielle. That would be the next name that you cross off the list. But note, we go into the H name after that. So obviously Hurricane Helene, that was the big one last year, and that happened at the end of September. So we're still about 2 or 3 weeks away from the 1-year anniversary of when Hurricane Helene did occur. Well, we're not too far away from the same pace that we were at as of last year. So yes, we're getting into the peak all time when we averagely see the most frequency of tropical storms and hurricanes. Although it's a very similar pace as the last year, and we did have a very active year last year. But like I said, Ansley Parker is going to have a lot more on that during the 5 o'clock show, so be sure to tune into that, and she'll show you how we're kind of measuring up compared to average and compared to what we did last year for the very active hurricane season. Here's your 7-day forecast. It is nothing but good news, folks. Like I said, if you don't have anything in the way of outdoor plans, I would highly recommend making some, especially as we go into the weekend. Yes, you'll see a 10% chance of rain starting on Thursday, going all the way into next Monday. That's more to just cover the bases. There looks like there's the chance for a few very isolated and very light showers in nature. It's not going to interrupt any outdoor plans. It may be something that you just have to take a step indoors for a brief moment in time. And we saw a very similar pattern a couple days last week where we were having a 10 or a 20% chance of rain. Those showers last for about 5 minutes in nature, giving you an idea of how small they will be if anything pops up. But if we continue to see good model agreement like we see for Tuesday and Wednesday, we very likely could backtrack and take these 10% off your 7-day forecast. But even at that, a 10% chance of happening means there's a 90% chance that it doesn't happen. So you have a very good likelihood of not only avoiding the rain over the next couple of days, but over the next week here in central Georgia. So yes, September's off to a pretty dry start as of right now. It does look like we don't have much in the way of rain that is really going to maybe put that number back closer to average for the month of September. But the good news is we're only 8 days into the month. We still have about 20 days in order to record some rainfall, and a dry stretch is very warranted because the last couple of weekends have been a bit messy, and especially for all you college football fans, you probably noticed the delay in the Georgia game, the delay in the Clemson game, the delay in the South Carolina game. And obviously that probably allowed for a lot of teams to lose some momentum. I know that definitely we're going to blame the weather on the Dogs' loss of momentum in that game. Hopefully we can have finally a dry weekend in the forecast and temperatures continuing to be below average, and those morning lows are going to be nice and fall-like each of the next 7 days, somewhere in the low 60s and getting into the upper 50s in a couple of areas. So a great weekend to have some outdoor plans. Like I said, typically September in years past, we're used to holding on to that hot and humid weather where you have about a 20 or a 30% chance of not only just a shower, but maybe even a thunderstorm in the afternoon hours. We don't get stretches of weather like this very often, even though it has been the normal for the last couple of weeks. And by the time we go into next week, we could finally see the afternoon high temperatures bump back above average right there around the 90-degree mark. The good news is I don't see those temperatures getting much higher than that 90-degree mark, maybe a 91 or a 92 by the time we get in there. But we'll fine-tune that as we get closer. The highlight will be some mostly sunny days each and every afternoon, and along with that, basically slim to no rain chances each and every day. Finally, a weekend forecast that is going to be very conducive for outdoor plans, and a Friday afternoon and evening forecast that will be very conducive for going out on the gridiron for week 5 now, I believe it is, of Football Friday night. It is hard to believe that we're almost halfway through the high school football regular season, and then, of course, once you get into November, that's when the playoffs get started. But hopefully this forecast is going to allow you to do whatever you want in terms of outdoor plans. Backyard barbecues, going out to the golf course, let all those plans fly. You got to make the most out of these calm weather stretches because we know we can definitely flip a switch in the snap of fingers, and obviously it is still hurricane season, and we know that activity has been slow so far, but we very well could see a ramp up in activity a little bit later than we typically do. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for that, making the most out of this week. And it always brings me joy to be able to report a good forecast. It just gives you a lot more energy and makes me happy to report the weather each and every day. So thanks for tuning in for your extended forecast. We'll be back here tomorrow, 10:30 once again, to provide you with an update, talk about any changes that we see for the foreseeable future. But overall, I don't see anything big in the way of significant changes, and hopefully we can continue this below average stretch until we officially transition into the start of fall on September 22nd. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you here tomorrow.